Hello and welcome. My name is Diane Gehart, and I am really excited to be here with you to talk about this very important topic that really does affect everyone in the field. And there has been some emerging research that shows there are some real inequities in terms of the pass rates, especially related to race, age, and class. And so we're going to talk about some of that emerging research. And then we're going to talk about what do people currently in the pipeline do to navigate this licensure pathway more successfully. And I am not going to be talking about all my wish lists for what's going to happen 5-10 years from now. That's pretty easy, I think, for any of us to have that wish list. But today, my real focus is how do we get those of you who are in the pipeline to pass and navigating some of the disparities that researchers are finding in pass rates. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I guess I want to just start by how did I even get involved in this whole conversation? I've been in the field for over 30 years, been a professor for 26, 27 of those years. And so I've been educating and helping people navigate licensure for decades. But something happened in the last few years where, due to California wildfires, my son's health issues, and the pandemic, things kind of aligned themselves so that I had the idea to go and get licensed in another state. And given that I've been licensed for so long as an MFT, I didn't think it would be so hard to get licensed in another state, but I was wrong. And yes, they were going to make me take the national MFT exam, which I thought was hilarious. Actually, I was first angry for about 24 hours, and then I was laughing because I'm like, oh my God, like, this is hilarious. You're making Diane Gehart take the licensing exam. I write the textbooks that everyone uses to study. I do all the YouTubes everyone uses to study for these exams. I've been prepping for people for years for this exam, and now I got to take it? I'm like, this is going to be so much fun. I'm so excited. So I created a study group that was a course to help people at the time. And it was live. I taught it live. And so I really got to meet people and hear their stories. And they were heartbreaking. And in fact, I got quite angry about how difficult this exam was for so many people, and especially people who I felt like I could sit there, I'm their instructor, I could tell they knew the material, but they weren't passing the actual exam. And so that really got me curious. And so that is really where I really became passionate about helping everyone pass this exam in ways that are fair and equitable. And so in that journey, I started, when I was sharing some of my experiences with one of my colleagues, Dr. Kevin Linus at Antioch University in New England, we were talking, and I said, I really would love to do some research to figure out what's going on. And that's when I discovered Kevin was a quantitative researcher. I am not a quantitative, I'm a qualitative researcher. So I'm really good at listening to those study groups and listening to the patterns and, distilling, the patterns of what people's lived experience are, but I'm not really good at crunching numbers. So Kevin, he had a team of doctoral students. I'm like, oh my God, this is a miracle. Who we started collecting data. Thank you to those of you who filled that out. And to just understand who passes these MFT exams and why and how and what factors there are. And Kevin, being a quantitative researcher, found like 5 standardized instruments, looking at trauma, test anxiety. I mean, lots of different variables. We looked at their training experiences. We looked at how many times they studied, how much they studied. We looked at childhood variables and their early education, as well as their college and graduate education. We looked at a lot of variables. Again, thank you to those who filled out that form. And we had a long demographic section looking at all the demographic variables. And so, we're still writing up the findings in 2023, but, Kevin and his team have been analyzing the data. And one of the key findings is related to race. And so that was really surprising. And there was nothing that kind of moderated or mediated that in terms of just social economic class, level of education. It's a real surprising finding that's hard for us to interpret. We also found, of course, that knowing, I don't know if of course, I say of course to those of us in the last year way to licensure, we say of course, because exam strategy was huge, as well as, knowing, feeling like you know the content, as well as managing test anxiety or having test anxiety. So these were the findings, and the study's not fully done. We're in the middle of it, so I'm just giving you some tidbits and highlights, and we obviously reserve the right to modify slightly these interpretations once we get the article solidly together. But these are kind of what we have found so far. Now, as we are, as Kevin and I are mulling over this, trying to make sense of what our findings are, in the middle of this, the National Association of Social Work produced a extensive, in-depth, detailed study of their exam pass rates where they found a lot of disparities. So there is a full report. You can find it at this URL here, but they identified both racial and age disparities. So here is a chart from the NASW report where we're looking at the racial disparities. And so as you can see here, that the highest pass rate were people who identified as white, 90.7%. Then those who identified as multiracial had 86.6%. Asian was 79.7%. And then Hispanic, Latinx was 76.6. Then Native American Indigenous at 73.5. And then Black at 57% pass on their first rate. So there's a huge disparity here along racial ethnic lines that we need to pay attention to. And so that was a very interesting finding. And so I have asked the BBS directly, that is the board that does the California licensing, whether or not they even have this data. What do we show in California MFT exam? And the answer is we've never collected the data. We don't know if it's legal to collect that data when you're taking a licensing exam for a state license. So they don't have the data, although since the NASW report, they are now looking at how to legally collect the data and to see where California stands. I've reached out to the MFTRB once or twice via email. I've not heard back, but I am sure they're also looking into this because it certainly has gotten people talking. So this is where we are right now, the best data we have, because it's the most comprehensive in terms of just what the issue is the NASW data. In terms of their gender data, you can see here, they broke it down into men and women are 82.7, men at 80.1% passing on their first attempt. So gender did not seem to be a significant variable. There was no significant difference between men and women in their data. And then finally, though, age came up as significant. Make it simple, each decade of life, your pass rate goes down to where if you're in your 20s, it's 91. And if you're in your 50s, it is 64%. So pretty big drop as well related to age. So interpreting this data is complex. It's not easy. And, I think it's somewhat easier to hypothesize around age disparities. You've been further out from college. Even if you went to graduate school, you're further away from your high school and your initial 12 years of education. Often they have busier lives. So there can be memory issues as you get older. So there's a lot that can be explained, or age makes a little more sense. It's still, how do we handle that? But I think the exact source of that racial disparity is harder to pinpoint, because you just can't look at the exam questions and say, let's revise these questions to take out the racism in them. But it's hard to see where that is. I mean, I can certainly argue that there's some of those questions around race and ethnicity that I would, like to see done differently. But that doesn't explain the entire, pass rate situation, the disparities that we're seeing at this magnitude. To have a handful of questions that maybe are making some stereotypical assumptions, that doesn't explain the pass rate disparities, because there are not enough of those questions to account for what's going on. And we know that, social workers are very attuned to equity and inclusion and diversity. And so I've not seen their exam, but I would hazard to guess there's nothing overtly racist in those exams. So what exactly is going on? And so when you think of racism, it's usually there is this clear discrimination against a person based on their race or ethnic group. and it's hard to say like where, when, and how that is happening when you actually look at exam questions. So the question again becomes, why is there this disparity? And I think, and then after this NASW study came out, there was a professor from Columbia who actually did an opinion piece. God, I believe it's the Wall Street Journal where he did it. And he's a linguist. He's an African-American linguist at Columbia University. And his thinking is that this has more to do with how parents talk to their children when they are young. And there's this difference they found, and it's actually the research he points to is actually race and class difference. Because what they did is they studied, some linguists studied middle-class white families and then working-class Black families. And they found very striking differences in terms of how the parents talk to their children. And I love this term. I'm going to use it when I develop the intervention and Laugh Your Way to Licensure. So this is a quote from his article, that parents, white middle-class parents ask disembodied information-seeking questions as a type of exercise. Oh my God, that defines a license exam question. Yes, disembodied. And that's actually one of the techniques and strategies I use in my Laugh Your Way to Licensure course is really, this question isn't asking you what you would do. This question is asking what generic therapist in this vignette would do, and that's not you. And so you don't answer the way you would do it. You answer the way that person would most likely do it. So I love this disembodied information-seeking question because it actually is already one of the interventions I teach people in my course. So I just didn't use the word disembodied, but I think it's a fun one. So we are definitely laughing our way to licensure in my course. So we're going to have fun with disembodied. So we're like, okay, get disembodied when you answer this question, okay? I'm going to have fun with it. Okay, so thank you, John McWhorter, for that cool word to get my students licensed. So white middle-class families also just talk facts for facts' sake. Like they like to bounce them around. They like to be able to regurgitate facts. It's like a fun little thing they do. But there's a lot of what I would call, this is my language, not his, hypothetical situations, because I talk about this in my licensing course. These are all hypothetical situations. And what he is saying is that linguists are saying that middle-class white families, and I'm guessing families that have more educated parents in general, regardless of race, are probably talking more hypothetically and bouncing a lot of facts around the room, which is just a different way of talking and thinking. And this happens throughout childhood. In comparison, the working class Black families really talked about practical, real world things. They're asking their kids practical, real world things. How do you do this? How do you make this happen? What's happening in the room and the world around us? So very hands-on and much more practical. And I would guess that if you come from a more working class family like I did, this is more how your parents talk. This is totally how my parents talked. We talked about how to clean the house and fix the car and do things. We did things, gardening, how to make plants grow. Like those are the things we learned. And then it wasn't done in a way we're bouncing lots of hypothetical, theoretical facts around. We're talking about how to plant this plant, how to effectively wash this car right here in front of us right now. It's a very different way of talking. And it's fascinating to think that that habitual way that you learned as a child for just thinking through things, is it totally practical here, real world now, or is it kind of hypothetical, in the cloud type thing, might really make a difference. Because if you think about it, the licensing exam is a series of 180 to 200 hypothetical situations. They're not about what you do with your clients. It's about what generic, non-existent therapist does with their clients theoretically. And I think that's a real important thing. So just in terms of my own class, what my, because I'm kind of my class, I get to listen every month. I meet live. We do sessions together. We answer questions together. We practice together. And it is, I think, the most affordable way to get your live coaching. Plus, you get the whole course with it. And I really do this because I want to figure out what's going on with these exams. As I can observe the disparity, as I teach these courses. And I talk to all my students, and my students pass. All of my students of color, my older students who've tried 4 other programs and can't pass. And so I ask them why. They're usually really happy to tell me. So as I interview them as to why they finally passed with this program rather than other programs, what I have heard is, number one, I go into test strategy. I do a ton of test strategy. We talk about being these disembodied hypothetical to kind of get folks there. We look at just, I give them this 3-part strategy. One of those parts of the strategy is the red light, green light method. There is a free YouTube video for everyone who's working through this exam to check that out on my YouTube channel. But that is what most people say makes the difference. So they got the content in other programs. They got the content. But what they were missing was how to actually engage those questions. And I think there are issues related to race, social class, how you were raised, age, that makes having a rock solid strategy that makes sense for your mind, how you work. I actually run them through the MBTI cognitive functions to help them figure out what type of mistakes they're most likely to make. We laugh a lot about that because I'm the type most likely to make mistakes. We have a good time. So the other piece is test anxiety and managing that, whether you think you have a problem with it or not. That's the second most common thing people cite coming out of my course when they pass, is by being able to manage that anxiety. You keep your smart part on, and you're much better able to recall everything you studied. Because if you get anxious, you're going to forget it all. Or you're not going to remember it clearly. You're going to be a mess. You're going to miss the details. You're not going to pass. So having a rock solid strategy. If you know my work, mindfulness we use. I also have someone who's helped me, add an EFT tapping. I don't care what you do. You can do, some people do the breathing. I don't care if you pray, meditate, call in angels. I don't care, but you need to manage your anxiety so you're totally calm and drawing from your prefrontal cortex when you're taking that exam. And then the other one is straight talk. Some folks just say, and they listen, lots of people listen to my YouTube videos that are free, that having an, explained jargon free makes a really big difference. So these are some of the strategies that we have found in my course to really bridge the disparities in pass rates. So, obviously the profession, I think, we have work to do around this issue. We need to get some better data. We need to figure out what's going on. I'm certainly doing research. I plan to continue do some formal qualitative research. I do informal qualitative research every month in my course, like listening to the success stories and people tell me what worked and what didn't. But if you're in the pipeline now and you're hearing about this, do not be discouraged, because we really can get you to pass. There is a way. Focus on that exam strategy, really understand how to read the question, read the STEM, interpret the 4 options. But having a rock solid exam strategy is certainly important. For some folks, I'll tell you, if you've tried this, if you've studied for 2 or 3 rounds and you haven't passed, it's usually just strategy and anxiety. It is not so much content. Oftentimes people know the content surprisingly well, but they don't understand how this test is actually working, because it's different than any other multiple choice test you've ever taken. And that test anxiety, can really get you. Do not underestimate how challenging that can be. So I hope you find this helpful. I invite you to check out my Laugh Your Way to Licensure course if you need that strategy. Join us if you need the camaraderie, if you need the coaching and you want it cheap, because this course is really about helping the entire profession figure out how to make these exams as equitable, the pass rates equitable, and people really do pass when they have it all. They have the content, they understand the strategy, you know how to manage test anxiety, you will get through this exam. But I do think as we study this disparity going forward, we are going to find that the language piece, it's in how it's all language, the kind of the logic piece is there. And it appears that there's, certain issues related to race, class, and even age that seem to be playing out in the pass rate disparities. So I hope that this gave you some new insights into the exam, got you thinking in new ways. If you're in the pipeline to get licensed, I hope it's gave you some hope. If you are a supervisor or professor, I hope it gave you some ideas on how to help your students. And we will just keep this conversation moving forward. You will definitely hear more from me on this topic in the near future. Be well and take care. And I present on this topic. So I am going to go ahead and just answer most of those questions right now for you. And I'm going to do that by actually going to the webpage. It is at, you can Google Laugh Your Way to Licensure or go to therapythatworksinstitute.com/laugh to licensure, and there are hyphens between each of those words. Googling is definitely faster. So this is a different type of course in that it's just not a whole bunch of either audio or video recordings where you sit there and you work by yourself and alone, kind of going through the program. It includes live monthly coaching with me, and that is where I talk to people about their experiences. We problem solve. We listen to what works from those who finish, pass each month, and we really just support each other to make this a fun adventure, and it really should be a joyful rite of passage. So you can check this out. Talks about, kind of the basics of the course, but I think the key thing here, and we've got more testimonials than I can get up. I literally have a long list of testimonials to keep posting up here. I don't know how big a web page can get, but I think we're certainly going to find out with this one. But I think the structure is really important after the video you just heard. So it's a 5-step program, and it is brain-based. It is based on how we learn, how we retain information, and how we perform well on a licensing exam, which is they're all different skill sets. So in the first step, we really focus on strategies. I remember when I first created this module, I was like, oh my God, there's a strategy for this and a strategy for that, strategy for this and that. So, and I'm going to, I keep adding strategies to this, but it really gets you in the right mindset. And I think a lot of people have said module 1, if they've been studying with other approaches and didn't succeed, like module 1 is like such a breath of fresh air. It really changes your whole relationship to the exam process, because it really should be a joyful rite of passage. It's one of our mottos, along with laughing our way. So we start actually with strategy. I actually have you look at your own self and how you learn and how your mind tends to work. And that really predicts where you're going to get things right. And more importantly, what type of mistakes you're likely to make. Because there's some people who, if they go back and change an answer, they're usually going to get it wrong. There are others who go back to change an answer, and they're usually going to get it right. And you need to know which camp you're in when you go back to review. So we really go into that, and it's very eye-opening and refreshing. But we go over exam strategy in a lot of detail. We go over test anxiety management as well, and we set you up for a program for that. And then for step 2, I get really embarrassed. This is part of the way. Half the time you're laughing at me, just so you know, in this course. But we tour the terrain with training wheels, which means you watch me take the exam blindfolded. My colleague, Ben Caldwell, who creates mock exams, created one for me. I got some wrong. I argued with him about some, but we take it together. And I talk you through it. I coach you through it. And for a lot of people, this change is a game changer, especially if they didn't pass with other programs. This is a game changer for a lot of folks. Then step 3 is what most people would consider your typical exam prep, where you do the deep dive. And so I actually have specially structured worksheets to because I want you to write it all down, because the brain likes that. So you're going to do a deep dive to make sure you know the content. And this one just kind of expands or contracts depending on how well prepared you are coming in. If you've studied with other programs, you won't spend as much time. It's your first time through. If you felt like your, grad program didn't give you what you need, or your traineeships, internships, you might spend more time here kind of filling in the gaps. There are a lot of theories. Usually people are filling in some gaps. And then step 4, what we do is we ensure that you've encoded the information correctly. So there are about 300 to 400 different, Quizlet flashcards that we use. And this course is for both the national and the California exam. It is one course. About 10% of the people are taking both exams, so they really save money that way. But 80-90% of the material is the same, but the testing strategies, how to answer those questions, anxiety management's about the same. I could have created 2 separate courses and probably made more money, but I just put everyone in together. We do the journey, and then there are different decks of cards and different different exams do have some different materials, and where that exists, we separate those out. You will see that in the decks of flashcards. And then what I do is there are, I think, about 300 practice quiz questions, but they're organized in a unique way. They're done by each theory. So you can say, okay, yes, I know Bowen theory, because you need to get 85 to 90% on that to say, okay, you've got the concepts. I know Satir, oh wait, I got to go back and study systems or structural or whatever it is, but you really double check to make sure you know enough knowledge to take that exam. So that is step 4. And then step 5 is taking a full-length mock. There is a re-recording of the second go-round of the initial mock I take in step 2, but then you do need to go elsewhere to get the full mark. I have worked with Ben Caldwell, who gives a special deal to my students to offer a mock exam that has all the explanations and is kind of set up more in that format. So that is how you wrap it up. You take a test drive. And so anyway, that's my course in a nutshell. I personally work with everyone in a group coaching session once a month. It's part of the course. And I did that so that, because I was hearing people spending lots of money on private tutoring, private coaching. And I really hope we can find just an easier, more affordable, more joyful way for MFTs to get licensed in the field. And I am here to support you each step of the way. So that is my course in a nutshell, if you're curious about it. And I welcome you to check it out, and I just hope you find whatever is going to really work for you. So hopefully this was helpful. Take care.